Hey everyone, welcome back to Integrative Psychonautics. I hope you're doing well out there. So in today's video, I wanted to address a common misunderstanding about how to work with psychedelics and kind of how they work that I see often online. And it's something like people wanting to be able to find a very particular piece of insight or information or particular memory. They want some sort of specific access to specific information in their nervous system to, in theory, help them heal. And I often see this question of how do I get at that information? How do I discover what exactly this is? How do I get this answer that I need, that I know is inside of myself? This kind of a thing. And I wanted to speak to you how this actually works and what we're doing when we're working with psychedelics, and offer you a counterpoint idea of how to approach this work so that you're not feeling totally disempowered and lost and stuck and have no kind of way to work with your nervous system, but at the same time you have a more clear expectation, because this idea that you can just magically go in like a laser beam and find the exact piece of information, you're going to know exactly what it is, I think is a bit misguided. So let me explain to you my understanding of how to work with the nervous system in psychedelic sessions, and quite honestly, beyond and outside of psychedelic sessions as well. And before we go ahead and get into it, please do me a favor if you like the content here, if you like this particular video, do the thing and, smash the like button, subscribe if you like my content, et cetera, et cetera. Please help me grow the channel. I'm terrible in terms of promoting. I'm great at coming up with content. I'm really passionate about this topic. I love to share this information with you guys. I get a lot of feedback like this channel's a hidden gem. Your channel should be much bigger. And so I'm going to do my side of things here and ask you to please help me grow to the channel if you like the content. So without further ado, let's talk about this topic of how to get at the information that's relevant in a psychedelic session. So like I said in the introduction here, I often see this question online of how do I work with my attention in a psychedelic session? A lot of times people find that their attention is just scattered all over the place. They can't focus, they can't think, they don't know how to do something useful and direct their attention in a certain way when they're on the medicine, which is understandable, especially if you're new or you're taking a dose that's maybe a little more than you're ready for or more than you can handle, especially in that initial kind of come up phase and kind of that first section of the journey. That can be a really difficult thing to do, even for a seasoned pro. But, there's this deeper question of how do I discover, this memory, or how do I get at understanding or getting answers or insight about this problem in my life? And there's kind of a tendency to want to treat psychedelics almost like a genie, like a wish-fulfilling genie, where I can rub the lamp and it'll come out and it'll magically answer all my questions and I'll know what I need to do, and then I'll come down off the medicine and go on my merry way. And I want to offer you a really different understanding of how to work with the nervous system, because more often than not, I do think the answers are in us. I think the information that we need to know is actually already present and already presenting in us. It's just that we don't know how to look, how to listen, and how to work with the information that's here. Right? So we're looking for the wrong information, or we're not recognizing the utility of the information that's already present. So in this discussion, I want to offer you the idea that instead of looking for specific targeted information, which is very much a prefrontal cortex, logical, rational layer of the brain way of processing and problem solving, I want to introduce the idea of what's a more bottom-up way of processing information, right? So top-down is logical, rational, linear, problem solving. This is, being logical. This is figuring things out in terms of mechanics. This is, imposing an idea from the conceptual level down onto the more felt sense of our experience. I want to propose to you that the real way that this works, more often than not, is from the bottom up, from the felt sense, from the emergent into the clarity. So let me explain how I think about this and give you a bit more of a sense of how to access, let's say, useful information or healing information in a psychedelic experience. But this is also true, quite frankly, if you get good at it when you're sober too. So let's talk about it. So I'd like to present an idea to you that I learned through my studies in hypnosis and hypnotherapy. And if you study, systems theory, this will be a familiar concept. And just as a felt experience, a felt sense experience, if you've done therapy, if you've done emotional processing, and especially if you've done psychedelics, this will probably already be something you kind of have experienced or kind of intuitively grasp or understand. And this is the idea of emergent information or emergent processing, right? So in other words, we interact with a system, in this case, our own nervous system on psychedelics. And as we interact with that system, there will be communications and responses and answers from the interaction that happen spontaneously, organically. And if you assume that information is somehow relevant or somehow useful or somehow a response to what it is that we're kind of prompting our system to share with us, then, often if we trust, there's kind of like a leap of faith element here. We have to trust and be curious and explore. And often it's from a felt sense upwards, from perhaps a body sensation or an emotion that we don't quite have a word for, this kind of a thing. If we start from tuning in to what's already here, what's already happening, and kind of working with that and getting curious about that and writing that and trusting that, often it kind of emerges up from the felt sense into the more clearly emotional, from the clearly emotional into the more linear and logical as an understanding, right? And usually if we're working in this bottom-up manner, we're working much more with our own inner healing intelligence, if you want to think of it that way, or our unconscious mind, which is kind of more of the master supercomputer that's running your entire system all the time, responsible for all the things you've ever learned and holding all that information and processing all the information you don't ever think about, right? So it's this deep, vast reservoir of intelligence. And if we trust that it's giving us something that's interesting or useful or relevant, even if we don't exactly consciously, from a conscious mind point of view, see it yet, but work with it as an emerging bubble of information. Often this is where we get the information that we really need, which is not always the information that we really want, right? So this is an important distinction to make, that often, if we're treating psychedelics like a genie that we can kind of like eat the substance and ask the questions and get the answers, right? Or find the specific information, find the memory that's going to heal us or whatever it is. What we're not doing is really being open and receptive to what our system wants to present to us, right? So how this often really tends to go down, so in hypnosis, or in somatic therapy as a different modality that works similarly, we work with body sensations, right? So we start talking about the issue for the person and the problem, and all of a sudden there's tightness in the throat, or there's a tension in the shoulders, or there's like a heat in the belly all of a sudden. All of a sudden the body starts talking, right? It starts presenting sensations and patterns, and maybe there's even a symbolic, like they close their eyes and it has a shape or color or quality to it. It feels sharp, or it feels round, or it feels long, or it feels angular, or what have you, right? The nervous system represents information in these very abstract ways in the body a lot of the times, as often, again, as shapes, colors, felt sense, this kind of a thing, right? So a lot of times, on a psychedelic, what happens is you take the mushroom, you take the LSD or the MDMA or what have you, and you get this wave of feeling. Sometimes you get a wave of a body sensation first. I just did a session recently with someone where it was a tightness in the throat and a trying to swallow. And as soon as they come onto the medicine, it's like, I feel like I keep needing to swallow and keep needing to swallow. There's something here. And as we explored it, there was a suppressing of communication, a suppressing of information that was held as this body pattern, right? And then once they got into that, they started to access, oh, I'm afraid to let go. I'm afraid to open up here, right? So that was a massive insight for them, right? But they wouldn't have necessarily been, started with, that's what I'm afraid of, and that's part of what's going on here, right? So this is often how it works. When I'm working with a client just in a coaching session or a hypnosis session, this is often how it works. They come to me and we start talking about it, and I ask them, well, what's going on in your body while you're talking about this? What are you noticing right now as you're thinking about this? And maybe they start thinking about a whole other thought that seems totally tangential, and they're, and then the question becomes, what is what we're talking about in this tangential thought? What's the connection there? What do they have to do with each other? And so there's this emergent organization of a pattern of information, of insight, of understanding, of clarity that takes a certain amount of patience and curiosity and trust and following to really get at. And that's really where the powerful, profound healing information is, right? So let's say, someone wants to take psychedelics because they feel lost in life. They don't know what they want to do for a career. They don't know what they want to do for their future. And they're feeling kind of desperate and hopeless and just kind of stuck and lost, right? Then let's say they take the medicine, they're hoping to get a clarity, they're hoping to get an answer about what they should do with their life, right? And instead, they start bubbling up all these memories about childhood and playgrounds, or they start getting all these memories about, thinking about, things that their parents said, or things that, they learned in school, or these random bits of information, or they get just a random tension on their right shoulder. And they're like, okay, I wanted to find out about my future, but now I've got a tension in my right shoulder. Well, what is that tension in the right shoulder? And maybe we follow that tension in the right shoulder. And maybe as we start to trace it back, lo and behold, it's holding a story. There's a narrative, there's a fear, there's an imprint, an impression that's being stored in the body in the right shoulder as this tension, right? Or being communicated there at least. And then, that imprint, of course, ties back into this fear of, asserting oneself. Maybe the person grew up in a situation where they weren't allowed to really self-express and say who they really want to be. So they've created this pattern of hiding from what they really feel and what they really want because they were never validated for what they want. And then, as an adult, that turns into a pattern of, I don't know what I want to do with my life because I've stopped listening to what I want because I was never validated or reinforced that it's okay to have what I want, et cetera, et cetera. You see where I'm going with this. So these are the kinds of emerging informational dynamics that happen when we work with bottom-up processing of information, right? And this is what if you're just going in with this very linear, logical, prefrontal cortex kind of tell me the answer kind of thinking, you're totally going to miss. And you're just going to think that tension in the shoulder or that sudden wave of weird emotion and the cold sweats and the shakiness you got is nothing, or is a drug effect, or is just your muscles being tight, which it could be. Sometimes it's debatable. Sometimes the body is just, maybe you're low on magnesium, or maybe, you're underslept, or maybe, et cetera. So there could be other things going on in your body. But often, the information that you're seeking that you really need, may not be a linear thing to what you're asking. There might be a deeper thing that's connected to it. And it really is often stored in the body as these kinds of sensations, as these waves of emotion, as these symbolic things. You might constantly see the same symbol in your mind over and over as a picture. And you're like, well, what's this? Well, maybe that's a symbolic communication from your deeper inner healing intelligence saying, hey, there's something about this symbol that, and maybe it's just a shape and a color. It's like, there's something about a blue square. Okay, well, what's that about, and you follow that and it can show you and it can tell you. But the thing here is that we want to move our attention into, again, this open, curious, trusting, kind of a certain faith in the process, as we work the information towards clarity, as we work the information. And a lot of times bodily memory and kind of unconscious nervous system memory is somatic. So you might have, just these very vague feelings. Oh, there's something over there that's kind of pushing against me. Oh, I feel small and squished. Oh, I feel kind of floaty and not in touch with I can't feel my toes right now, or something like that, right? You get these, but you don't know. And maybe that's related to a specific incident, or maybe that's related to a dynamic, right? An overall set of life experiences that we had as a repeated theme, or a repeated set of experiences, or a repeated message that got internalized into the nervous system. So what I'm trying to say here, just to wrap the video, we'll call it done, is that you want to work with this emergent information and understand that as you're on this healing journey, as you're on this truly transformative, process, that it involves a certain mindset of openness, of curiosity, of inquisitiveness, of kind of trusting the process, and kind of a dancing, engaging with emergent information. And as the information's emerging, I think it's important to remember that to hold it loosely until you get real clarity, right? There's a moment where the clarity clicks and you're like, oh, this makes 110% clear, perfect sense. I know what the fuck this is about. If you don't have that and you're like, oh, I'm having these kind of impressions and these feelings, and maybe these things were here, hold those conclusions, those ideas, those insights loosely as possibly true, or possibly also just emotional communications from the deeper layers of the nervous system, or symbolic communications from the deeper layer of the nervous system, and just work with these emergent impressions and memories and feelings and senses and stay curious about it as they start to self-organize. And if you really work that process, and to be quite honest, sometimes this is really where a sitter or a guide or a coach like myself, or a psychedelic therapist or someone like that might come in really handy, because you want someone who can kind of help you sit with all of this in an open way and remain curious, who has that skill, so that they can kind of teach you and help you hold that kind of space with yourself along the way. But this is what I think is more useful in the big picture and in the longer run than really trying to treat yourself like a wish-fulfilling jewel, or like a magic genie that's going to answer all your questions. In my experience, sometimes it works like that, but very rarely. Very rarely do I go, this is what I want to know, this is the problem I'm stuck with, boom, I'm going to eat some psychedelics, and boom, I rationally now clearly know what the answer is, and now I can go on my way and do that. Sometimes you get that, but often it's this much more complex, convoluted, layered, kind of felt sense, emergent discovering of the solution or the answer that you're looking for. So anyways, I hope that's helpful. I wanted to just put this information out there because it's often one of these things that people really seem to misunderstand about psychedelics or get wrong, because we see these things like, oh, I realized X, Y, Z about my life, and I had this sense of profound connection, and I had this memory come back to me. You see these reports and you assume that that's a linear process. And usually, if you're in the thick of one of those kinds of psychedelic experiences, you're really just letting the psychedelic experience unfold, and then these things kind of bubble up, right? So this is the way. This is the process. This bubbling up of information and working with it, having the trust and the courage and the comfort to do that, is the way of working from the bottom up, from the body, from the felt sense, from the unconscious mind. And I think psychedelics facilitate this and amplify this and make this easier. But like I said in the intro, this is also something you can do on your own via hypnotherapy, via somatic therapy, via practicing interoception and tracking and learning how to pay attention to what's going on in your body. If you do IFS or any form of parts work, that's another version of beginning to become aware of these kinds of emergent pieces of information. But this is really how we use this tool. What I found, just to kind of wrap all of this here, is when we approach it this way, it's uncanny how often the communications from the deeper self are just absolutely spot on. It's just that we don't have the kind of curiosity or the openness or the broadness of mind or the subtlety to really listen and really remain curious and really see what it is that's being shown to us. Sometimes that's because we don't have certain perhaps therapeutic ideas or frameworks or concepts in place. So we're being shown something we don't have a reference for in our conscious mind. And this can be, again, where you want to work with somebody who might have a broader set of understandings that they can bring to the table here. But this is the path. This is what psychedelic work is all about, in my personal opinion. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that's useful. More content on the way for you guys soon. I always appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching. Much love to you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.